Hello, everyone. How are you? Damion Taylor. I'm here with Ray Ellingsen, who you probably all know from Moving Pictures Media Group, and we have a very exciting conversation for you today. We're going to talk about the real business behind film and entertainment, the part of the business that rarely gets press or visibility, but this is really the meat and potatoes of how things work, especially if you're an independent filmmaker. So before I jump in and start asking Ray a bunch of questions, hello, Ray. Introduce yourself for those who may not know and tell them what you do.
Sure. My name is Ray Ellingsen. I'm one of the partners at Moving Pictures Media Group. We are a full service film and television production company, but we also have a development division, which we develop film, television, and other media content for clients as well as our own properties. I've been in the industry for probably way too long. But I've produced 12 films. I've been a line producer and I've developed numerous projects, not only for ourselves, but as I said, for other clients as well.
Well, thanks, Ray, for taking time. You and I talk a lot. We've done something similar to this before, but today I'm really excited because we'll get to do something that we don't normally get to, and that's really dive into how does this industry work, especially now as things are changing so rapidly with AI, studio mergers, all of these various factors coming into play. And I think to frame our conversation, it probably makes the most sense to start at the beginning of the whole film process, right? Development. That's where a lot of people get stuck, actually, and they never get beyond that part. So, coming into development, one of the things that we see at my company, and I know you've seen as well, is there are lots of questions about financing and building an audience and distributors. And sometimes people are trying to tackle everything all at once and not realizing that they can't and they probably shouldn't even. But really, from what you do day in and day out, where should a filmmaker really be starting for development? Like, what makes the most sense for ensuring that they're actually going to get somewhere with it versus just kind of the hunt into perpetuity?
Sure. And I think, the first thing to do is start off with a definition of development because everybody's
Yes.
got their own euphemistic idea of concept of what development is. And it's funny, I've sat on panel discussions at like South by Southwest or Telluride, and I'll be up on stage and I'll be like, where you at with your film? Well, I'm in development. What's that mean? Well, I'm trying to get my film made. So development is this sort of weird, ethereal term that people toss around, but all development is just a laundry list of things that you have to have in place in order to meet the requirements for production funding. What I mean by that is whether you're doing debt financing, which is how 90% of film and television is financed in the industry. That's through somebody like Western Alliance Bank, Pacific Mercantile Bank, any of the entertainment banks out there. Whether you're doing deficit financing through somebody like Amazon or Hulu or any of those studio streaming services, or whether you're doing private equity through somebody like Gulf Capital, they all want to see the same things. They want to see risk mitigation. They want to see collateral. And those are the two bookends of development. Risk mitigation is in the form of analytics data, things like comparisons and trends, market analysis, projections, world release data metrics, audience saturation reports, things that you and I could care less about. Well, you care a little more than I do, but things that you want to put together. So when a bank or finance institution is looking at this, they're going to go, who's your audience? How are you going to reach your audience? What's your saturation point? What's your methodology of deployment into the marketplace? These are questions they want to ask so that they can bring down that risk factor so that if you're asking for $1 to $5 million for your film, it makes sense on paper why they're going to enter into that agreement or arrangement with you. The other end of that is collateral. A collateral instrument in our industry is no less than a distribution sales agreement with minimum sales guarantees and or pre-sales in the foreign marketplace. That means when you go to a financer, they want to see that you have a contract with a distributor that says, hey, based on this project, based on our involvement, based on these deliverables, once it's delivered to us, we will guarantee X number of dollars back to the finance institution within X number of months. That is a distribution sales agreement with minimum sales guarantee. I don't want to go deep into the weeds with this. Minimum sales guarantee, if you have a $1 million budget, as an example, you may not get a $1 million sales minimum sales guarantee. But if you get a $450,000 minimum sales guarantee for the domestic market, and you can sell the foreign market to somebody like Voltage, and you can get another 300,000. Now you're at 750, you got a $250,000 deficit, which if you go to say going to I don't know, like tax incentive state, and you're getting 20% back of your spend, which is not of your budget. Let's say you're getting 80,000 back in your tax incentives. So now you're at 250, now you're at 170. And if you can pick up sales or broadcast rights or something else, that mitigates the risk. That's a collateral instrument that a bank can look at and go, okay, we know we're going to get this much back. And sometimes they'll want you to put up the difference. Sometimes they'll have other companies come in. It depends. But the point of that is the collateral instrument is your distribution. The other side of development is your risk mitigation. Everything in between is development. A big portion of that, there's legal formation, there's securing your distribution, there's all these elements of budget and schedule that's bondable with a completion bond company. But one of the biggest elements is social media and building an audience. And I think that's what we're here to discuss tonight.
And I want to hone in on a point that you mentioned that's, I think, really important for a lot of people who are in this business to understand. And I want to highlight the fact that what the banker is not looking for in development, what a financier is not looking for in development necessarily is creative vision. They want business. And it's not to say that it's not important, because your creative vision has to be something that is monetizable, that can be sold in commerce. And that's a very important distinction. A lot of filmmakers that my team works with when we're doing consulting for social media and what have you are really focused on the creative, but they never thought about who is going to pay for this. And that's going to be the really important thing, because that person who's paying for it is the one who now covers the budget, mitigates that risk that you just talked about with the banks. How does that conversation happen? How do you have that conversation when you're working with filmmakers to really get them on board with that? Because not every filmmaker has that background in terms of finance or managing that. Like what can they do to get up to speed really quickly on all of those things?
Well, let's break this down a little further. There's everybody says, I need financing for my movie. And you're like, okay, how much do you need? I need $5 million. How'd you come to that number? Well, I've got a top sheet budget. Okay. You kind of want to have a day-to-day schedule and an actual production budget, but put that aside for a second. So you need $5 million. That's your production budget. How are you going to get all the elements necessary so that when you try to get that production budget, they're going to give it to you? That's back to development. And then, so there's two stages of financing that filmmakers need to understand first and foremost before they even do anything. There's production financing, which everybody wants, but there's development financing, which is the money to put together things like building an audience, putting together things like getting a budget and schedule that's bondable, bringing on a producer's representative to secure you distribution. These are all development costs. So there's development financing and production financing. And I think a lot of filmmakers just go, oh, I just need the money. Well, you need the first step of money, which is development, because you need to build an audience. When you go to a distributor, and I'm jumping a little ahead here, but when you go to a distributor, the distributor, you go, hey, I want this actor and I want this, and it's going to be a great movie. And they go, ho hum. And as you know, and I know very well, Damion, distributors are incredibly lazy and unimaginative. So unless you spoon feed them everything, they don't get it. I actually had this happen to me with Film Mode a couple times. I went to them, tried to get a distribution deal, couldn't get it, went back, and we had built an audience. And we said, by the way, perhaps we forgot to mention, we have 500,000 active followers on social media. That was the trigger for distribution. And distribution is the trigger for finance. So it's sort of a domino step, but you start with development. You need to put together those elements, and you have to pay for analytics. You have to pay for a producer's rep. You have to pay for social media, and to bring somebody like Prometheus, your company, on to help build that audience. I know you're a super nice guy, but I can't imagine you do all that for free. So, but those are things that you have to put together first. And those are the elements. If you're talking about filmmaking, what does a filmmaker need to know? They need to know there's two stages to getting your film made. They also need to know what Sam Arkoff once said, which is the film business is 95% business and 5% film. And if more filmmakers understood that, they'd be much more successful. So you have to treat it like a business. And going into that business, you have to go, there's the elements here I need so that I have the ammunition and the tools to attract that bigger financing. I hope that covered your question. I may have
No,
skewed a little.
definitely. No, 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 no. It was perfect. Um, in that, diving deeper into that business aspect, one of the questions that we often find ourselves coming up against is how does my creative vision get made in terms of what I want to make and what sells, right? And for a lot of people, it's very important to sit down and ask yourself, what is your goal? Is your goal to build a career, to make a living off of your creativity? If so, you need to make something someone's willing to pay for. If your goal is to be creative and push the envelope for the sake of creativity, that's different. You have more freedom in that. If your goal is somewhere in between, then that's a different approach. You might have to one day do something that's you know purely commercial, and the next day now you've made enough money to do that thing that was a passion project. In terms of how you help creators move through that process, what does that look like in real life? Because I think a lot of people hear like you need development, you need the funding, you need the production funding, you need to have something that will sell. But can you walk through like what does a day in the life? Like if I'm a filmmaker and I come in, like how do I do that? Because all I know how to do is make something that looks really cool and people want to, I think people want to watch, right?
Sure. Sure. I think, one of the things you have to start off with is, we're talking about what you brought up. Do you want to have a business as a filmmaker, or do you want to just put your art out there and, be Van Gogh and be a starving artist and cut off your ear and die poor? If you want to make Requiem for a Dream, God bless you. But that is not a financial commercial success. Now, 20 years later, people are going, wow, that was brilliant. But at the time, people are like, well, what the hell is this? Um, I'm not saying it wasn't a great film. I'm just saying that is that if you want to go make Requiem for a Dream, then you're talking about something totally different than making a movie where you have support and you can get the financing and you can get all those things together. So the first step for you is, as a filmmaker, you got to go, am I making art or am I making a movie that I want to be artistic with? And once you answer that question, if you go, I want to make a movie, but I want to have some artistic creativity, the next step is you need to put together a team of people. The whole cliche of it takes a village. It really does. And I think one of the things, if you're looking at first steps, is you have to go, okay, I want to make this movie. I need to get investors. I need to track them. So the development stages are just a laundry list. You go to analytics. Well, first thing you do is you go to get coverage on your script because you are not objective about your idea. I guarantee it. I was a writer, not objective about my material. So you get coverage. That's a third party person who comes in. They charge a couple $100 and they go, here it is. Here's a breakdown. Here's the great thing about your script. Here's the crappy thing about your script. Here's the different layers of it. Here's your character development. Here's your story and plot line. Here's the flow of it. And use that instead of getting defensive and going, but my film is perfect. I would take that information and be objective with it because that's going to help you get to the next step, which is your analytics. You're going to take that to a reputable analytics firm like Film Profit or Baseline, and you're going to go in and go, here it is, show me everything I've got. And they're going to go, here's a breakdown. Here's your genre. Here's your market. Here's how you can get this thing. And that market, people look at analytics and they're like, I'm not spending all this money on analytics just for a financer. Well, yes, you are if you want financing, but B, me personally, as a filmmaker and a producer, every time Jeff Hardy at Film Profit has done a development package for me, every time he's done an analytics package, that is my blueprint as a producer of how I'm going to make that film and how I'm going to get it and execute it and get it into the marketplace. It is, a step-by-step, blow-by-blow rule book or guidebook to get you as a filmmaker through the process of development into production and into the marketplace. So there's certain steps you need to take if you're starting at square one. You're like, I'm a wide-eyed filmmaker. How do I get my movie made? It's like Heather Graham getting off the bus and going, where do I go to be a Hollywood star? If anybody got that reference, God bless you. But if you're going in and saying, hey, I'm a filmmaker, what do? You treat it as a business. You build a team. That team is people who do your analytics, people like you, Damion, who build social media and build an audience for people. You go to somebody who's a producer's representative who can get you distribution, has those relationships. It is not a single effort. You did the single effort when you wrote your script. Now it's time to bring on the team. And so when you bring on that team through development, that helps you get all the elements necessary so that when you take it to the next step for production, you actually qualify and meet those requirements so that you can get your movie actually made.
How would you say in today's climate where the market has changed so substantially, um, how would you say that the process has changed? Because the steps are still the same, but it seems like where the responsibility lies and the timing of each of those steps is changing now. Can you speak a little bit to how that's changed and what that looks like now versus what it used to look like? Because I think a lot of people still think of what was happening in the early 2000s even, but that's not
Well,
the case anymore.
no, it's not. And the big reason for that is let's look historically at the 80s. Back in the 80s, what was the big new media? It was VHS. And VHS came along and it opened up a huge market. And all of a sudden, you didn't have to be a studio to make a movie. You didn't have to have millions and millions of dollars to reach the theatrical platform. You didn't have to do just strictly network, CBS, ABC, all the regular networks, movie of the weeks, which, was like it was a death sentence for filmmakers and directors. Oh, I did a movie of
Yeah.
the week. Oh, you obviously have no talent anymore. Okay. Like the day Scorsese did a movie of the week, his career would end. So, you have these two very differentiated platforms of filmmakers. And so what happened? VHS came along. It allowed people like Roger Corman and Lloyd Kaufman and all these independent filmmakers to really take advantage of the market because Troma Pictures, which was Lloyd Kaufman's company, which I got my start there, he made crap like The Toxic Avenger. Unwatchable, but it had an audience on VHS because people could go to the video store, rent this thing for $2, and just have a lot of fun with it. And
Yep.
so what happened is you had emerging platforms. Now let's fast forward to today. We have streaming service, we have TikTok, we have your phone, we have all these different devices and platforms that you can view content on. And what that's done is that has changed the market dramatically. And so you go, well, what's filmmaking like versus, 80s versus now? Well, before it was very structured, very defined, uh, it was a very defined system. Now, anybody with, anybody with an iPhone can go make a movie, maybe, but you better think about building an audience so that people want to actually see that thing. Um, and so what's happened is you asked what's changed. What's changed is the onus or the responsibility has gone more to the independent filmmaker now than it ever has before. But in the same sentence, the resources and ability to make your film has also expanded exponentially. And what I mean by that is, we have companies that now you have AI as a tool. You have all these things as a tool to help you as an independent filmmaker, which are not expensive, which means the platform bar has lowered dramatically. Now it comes to the equalization point, which is audience. And that's the whole gist of this conversation, I think, is building an audience. And I think what's happened, the market has changed because before you had to rely on stars, you had to rely on studios, you had to rely on marketing and advertising from people who had a lot of money. And now what you need to do is build a team and what I want to address in this is you, because this is what you do for a living, building an audience as an independent filmmaker. And that is the key change to what's happened to our industry. Emerging platforms, yes. Streaming services, a lot more ways to view, a lot more devices to view your content on. That has all changed this market dramatically. But now it's come down to one fine point, which is if you can build an audience, you can get a project out there. Because distributors, like I said earlier, I went to a distributor and I could not get him to sign a deal. And then I went, perhaps I forgot to mention, I have 500,000 active followers on social media. That closed the deal. I hope that answers that.
No, I think that's a brilliant question. You mentioned AI. We'll get back to that one because that's going to be a hot topic, using AI as a tool. But you also brought up something that I think is very important for people to consider, and that's how the responsibility of building an audience has shifted. I often have conversations with people who are, this will be really great. Once I get it made, then the studio will do the marketing and they'll find it. And to be very honest, that hasn't been, the industry hasn't been that way for a while. we are in the age of reboots and remakes and adaptations because those things already come with an audience. You know where to find that audience and you know what they like about the thing. So in terms of risk and marketing effort, it's very low lift. So for something new, you have to be able to compete with that. You have to be able to say, I can bring you an audience too. And I know exactly where to find them and what they like about this and why. And that doesn't always mean that you come in with a million people, on your social media, because not every project warrants a million people. Just like not every movie's meant to be a blockbuster. Some are meant to be smaller, intimate, niche movies. And in that vein, the responsibility of what's expected of a filmmaker now has changed. You're not just there to execute technically on making the film. You're there now to present them with a package. Even though you're still starting, you're in development, you're just now, you still have to have some sort of a package that's ready and says, no, I can do this thing and it'll be really beneficial to you, distributor or whomever. Or by the same token, you may not even go to a traditional distributor and there are other avenues that you can take. Would you mind diving into when you bring that package, how do you leverage that? How do you talk about it in a way that lets you come in as a filmmaker and say, I am bringing you value versus you're going to help me get something?
Well, yes, let me address that, but also let me address the sort of different levels of distribution. And this is something you and I have talked about, Damion. Everybody makes a film and, oh, it's going to go theatrical.
Yes.
Maybe, but theatrical is not necessarily the best opportunity or the most profitable opportunity or the best way to reach an audience. Theatrical is up here. Everybody thinks they want it. But when you do theatrical, there's a couple of things that have to be in place. One, you have to have marketing that equals at least your budget. So let's say we got a $5 million budget. Now you just put another 5 million to 10 million into marketing because you have a different marketing strategy for theatrical release. So because you're dealing with exhibitors, you're dealing with all these other people who have their hands out. And so you're looking at, say, $5 million film now has to make 15 million to break even, which means your audience has to be 30 to 40 million to even consider that. If you don't have 30 to 40 million people in your audience on this scenario, then theatrical makes no sense. In fact, it's a loss leader. Sometimes you'll do an independent theatrical release where you'll, either four wall, which is a term where you buy the exhibitor's theater space, or you have a limited theatrical release through a distributor who says, hey, look, I have contracts with these exhibitors and I can get it to maybe 50 to 100 screens. And you put it out there just so that you can have the advertising that are played theatrical.
Yep.
And if you have that level, that doesn't cost you a ton of marketing because your marketing is built into the exhibition of it. And then that might be one of your methods of getting into it, limited theatrical, right into streaming or right into whatever, a third party. So how do you determine, am I going theatrical? Am I going streaming? Am I going to do a hybrid in between? Am I going to do the festival route? All these things are determined during analytics. When you have remember, it's a blueprint as a producer of how I'm going to execute this into the marketplace and my methodology of deployment into the marketplace. When you're talking about all these different levels, you may think you want theatrical, but it may lose tons of money going that route. You may think, oh, this is straight streaming, but then you find out from your analytics, no, you're going to be doing a festival run on this because that's how you're going to gain an audience. So the analytics are going to determine a lot of how this film is going to be taken out based on what the audience is and who that audience is and how to reach them directly. So those are all determining factors. And I may have strayed a little from what you wanted here, but I think
No, it's perfect.
I think it's important to know that, if you're a filmmaker and you want to take this out, there's a lot of determining factors to decide. You just don't go, oh, it's going to be theatrical and win an Academy Award. Maybe, but your analytics may say differently, and you need to listen to that because you're paying them good money based on their experience and their knowledge of how to deploy this film into the marketplace based on a ton of factors.
And I think actually, before I put on my audience development hat really quick, just so everyone knows, we're collecting the questions as we go, and we'll have some time at the end to answer the questions. So if we haven't answered your question yet, please, we have not forgotten about you. We can see them, and we will be answering at the end. So with that, now I'll put on audience development hat and speak to that a bit. It is a blueprint, and sort of my motto, not even sort of, it is my motto. It's what we live by is go where the audience is. If you're trying to sell something and there's nobody there, then no one's going to buy it, right? So, so often we see people saying we want to go theatrical. Is that where your audience is? Is that where you're most likely to get them? Unless you're being strategic to your point, where you're using theatrical as a way to get into the streamer. And if you're buying out the theaters, they tend to not care as much if you're in theaters and live right now on whatever streaming platform, right? It makes you look good on the streamer end because people think, oh, wow, this is on the movie theater and I can see it here right now today. You basically made theatrical a marketing tool.
Mm-hmm.
So there, a lot of people have this perception that theatrical is going to give them prestige and that's where the money is going to go. And I see a question about talented. That's actually another great thing that we'll want to talk about in a little bit. But a lot of times the things that people think matter really don't, not to the extent that they think so. So being in a movie theater doesn't mean you'll make money. I remember working at Universal and at Sony and all the studios, and one of the things that was interesting is people would talk about, ooh, it made $60 million in the theaters, right? It's like, yeah, but it cost 80 million to make. You know, when we made our profit, when we sold it on DVD. That's how we made money. There were times where we never made our money back theatrically, but we made all of the money on DVD, which is why we started doing straight to home entertainment because
Mm-hmm.
it was cheaper, and then we got straight into the profitability part of the process. And then you would see something like Fast and Furious where we went to DVD for 3 or 4 movies, and the audience grew and grew and grew until we were like, hey, you know what, we're going to bring this back into a theater. And then people came back, and that new one in the theater did better than the previous ones, and it kept growing. But at the end of the day, it was really more a factor or more a function of knowing your audience
Mm-hmm.
versus wishful thinking or shooting for prestige. Prestige is great. Prestige is not the thing that actually runs a business.
No, no, you're correct. No, and that's interesting. It's funny you're talking about building an audience, and I really want to transition into a question for you, okay? Um, so if I'm a filmmaker and I go, okay, I know I got to build an audience, like, and I come to you at Prometheus and I go, hey, Damion, I got this movie and it's going to win me Academy Award when it goes theatrical, and you're going to hopefully hamper that, temp down that enthusiasm a little. But I come to you and I go, okay, how do I build an audience? So are there steps or stages, or what is the process of building an audience for a filmmaker who has, say, a horror film, low budget horror film? And by the way,
Yeah.
we go into low budget horror film, but that's one audience building mechanism. If we go into a comedy, it's a totally different audience building mechanism. So let's just address horror to start and move on from there if we may.
Perfect. I think you addressed probably the key thing that's really important is that each audience is going to be different. There is no one size fits all for everything. And I think going to horror, things like horror, anime, and those sorts of the genre content is it's like gold. I love it because there's an audience there that has a very dedicated, voracious appetite that you don't necessarily find in the big blockbuster stuff, right? Those folks are there when the movie's good. Those folks are there when the movie's bad. It's because they like the content, they like the art behind it, they like the themes behind it. They have a core relationship to it that permeates usually throughout their entire lives in some way. And so for that, I think horror is a great example. The first thing I want to understand is if we're going to go simple, what are competitive titles? Like what's similar, right? Is there anything that's similar that got a similar audience? And sometimes you might not find an exact match, but you'll find a piece of your audience here, a piece of your audience here, and you take all of those overlaps to really understand, okay, these are the themes that seem to draw that audience. And each one of these people or these groups are coming in for that specific theme. So the first is understanding the why. And I think that's a thing that a lot of the people who I work with, some get it right away. Some people have never thought about the why. The why has been, I want to make a movie. Okay, but if I'm the audience, why do I want to see your movie? And you have to really put yourself in the audience's shoes because it's really hard when you're a filmmaker, and I can speak from experience, like, I love this. This is the best idea ever. And but I'm an audience of one. And it's really important to go beyond me or even just my closest circle to see, are there things about this that I'm missing that either could push the audience away or even bring in audience that I wasn't expecting. Uh, so our first step is really always understanding what are the key themes, tenets, elements to your project that are going to really drive and make it unique, that make the story, the vision yours, and how do those match with the elements and ideas and themes that audiences are looking for? Whether it's stuff that's already been seen or it's things that we've seen people talking about. There are times where there might not be a comp for it, but we can see that there's an audience asking for it. There's in forums, people are talking about it, complaining about the fact that I don't have anything original, or this person, it's always the same person doing that same role. Let's change it up. So you can start to tap into those things, but you need some sort of proof or data behind it.
On that note that you're talking about, because it's something that I've heard you say that before, and I've heard other people talk about, you got to find your audience. And I think one of the greatest examples was that Ash Grayson over at Ribbo told me was they did a film, and Ribbo Media does digital audience marketing and analysis, and you've worked with them, I think, directly
Yep.
as well. And Ash told me something once about a film they did called Hacksaw Ridge. And Sony came to, the story, I
Yep.
think. Yeah. So Sony came to Ash and they said, "Hey, we got this film. It's this World War II movie, and it's called Hacksaw Ridge, and we did test audiences, and it flatlined." And they're like, "You need to fix this." And he went, "Great." And they said, "Great, you have 6 weeks." And he went, "What?" And by the way, as you know, marketing takes 16 to 60 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and so he basically looked at it and he went back to Sony and he said, "You guys are idiots. This is not a war movie." And they were like, "Yeah, it is. It's a World War II movie and it's about the Pacific." And he said, "No, no, no. This is a story about a man who was it's a true story, by the way, Hacksaw Ridge. It's a story about a man who was a conscientious objector who served his country, refused to pick up a rifle, and wound up winning the Congressional Medal of Honor. Saved hundreds of lives. Everybody ridiculed him. His own fellow, military personnel ridiculed him and berated him. And at the end, he became a hero. It's a true story. It's not a World War II film. It's a faith-based, family-valued film." And he said, "That's your audience." And he went on to market to the faith-based, family-valued audience vector, and it became a huge hit. And I think, the obvious thing, and this is what I want you to touch on is, and you just did a little bit, is you may obviously think I've got a horror film, but you may not. And depending on what that audience vector is, where you can find the most people interested in that, who knew that Hacksaw Ridge, a World War II violent film with gunfire and death, would be a family valued film? But it was.
And I think that's the really important part. I mean, there's so many examples of that. I've even come across that a lot of in my own career, where I think I may have told you the story about the romantic comedy we were doing. We had a team and we're going to be great. We need to really start getting more female viewers. We're going to make this romantic comedy. And we thought it would be a really great way for us to build our female viewership on this channel. And turns out the romantic comedy we made attracted guys. And we figured, oh, you know why? It's because there's two guys fighting over a girl, even though the girl is the main character. And so they rewrote it, redid the whole thing. So now it's two women in the place where the two guys were, and it's a guy, but the two women are kind of like the main characters now. And it attracted men again, because now the guys are like, oh, there are two women fighting over me. And everything we did to try and make this thing into a romantic comedy for women just flatlined. It didn't go the way we wanted to. And so we had a choice to make. Do we lean into the audience that we have and make the thing that they love, or do we keep trying to find the thing for the audience we want? And I think that's one of the things that's difficult as any sort of creative, especially in filmmaking, when you have a vision and you think that your audience is going to be this one group, or that this element that you really love about your project is going to be the thing that everyone else loves. And when you put it out there or you test it, fortunately, you do this early enough when you talk about it, you find out that the thing that you love is not what everybody else loves. It's not necessary. And it might be something that there's a faction that loves it and they may be very passionate about it, but those might not be the people who are going to be big enough to make your project a success. And so testing and actually talking about it and building the audience ahead of time allows you to make those mistakes and learn those lessons early. And it's not always a mistake, it's getting insight. A lot of people tell me, I don't want to come in and do creative by numbers. That's not what I'm doing. I don't believe in that either. As, having been a creative myself, I don't want to come in and tell you paint by numbers. But what I do want to do is I want to be the gauges in your car. So I tell you if you have enough gas to get where you're going. I tell you how fast you're going so you know how fast you'll get there. I'll tell you, hey, it's getting dark. Let's turn on the lights. All of those are, oh, check engine, you need oil. All of those sorts of things so that you can get your vision to where you want to go. You're setting the course, but I'm telling you when, hey, you know what? That might not get you where you want to go. You can make the decision then. Well, I'm going to keep going this way or I'm going to take a different route. But that's really the goal of the insights of audience development is to help you find out where your people are and how to talk to them in a way that gets you the most visibility and the most traction for your project.
Wow, excuse me. I didn't want to interrupt you. While we're on that, so what are the platforms you use to build an audience? I know this, it's rhetorical for me because you do it on clients all the time, but people out there, if they're saying, well, okay, there's an audience out there, how do I reach them? What platforms am I using? How am I generating that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, great question. This is another one where you need to be where your audience is, right? So everyone goes social media, you go to Facebook, you go to YouTube, and sometimes that's yes, but you may not use it the way you think you would. It might be that instead you're going to Substack or you're using podcasts. It's really everything is focused around where your audience is. So if you're trying to create something that's going to be a next viral hit amongst 13 to 25-year-olds, you're not going to Facebook to do it. No one's there. Um, TikTok, you might get lucky and get there, but even that's a little bit tricky, right? So understanding where your audience is and what they like and why they're using those platforms is really important. And that's one of the things I start off with very early on, so that you can make sure that even passively, you're in places where your audience is. If you think back to how many times you've seen an ad for a movie, a TV, or something that was interesting to you, most of the time you didn't go seeking out, find something interesting for me. Sometimes we do that, but that's very rare. What did happen is you were most likely in a theater going to see something that you already liked, watching something that you already liked, or reading something that you already liked, and it happened to be in the place where you are so that you can come across it and discover it. So creating that chance, that opportunity for discovery is really the key. And social media is great at that. But you need to be using the social media then that your audience is going to be using. You need to be talking about it in a way that is relevant for your audience. And sometimes as filmmakers, we get in this zone of, I'm going to talk about the technical aspects and being a filmmaker and I'm serious and like the tech, but that's not what the audience necessarily cares about. They may really care about the story. How did you pick this character? Some of the behind the scenes. Oh, what were some funny things that happened on the set? Yeah, it was a drama. So tell me, right? So understanding what are the things that drive them and where else are they spending their time, you can now make it more, I don't want to say seamless, but it requires less effort than to find them. If you're trying to force your way in to find somebody who's not where you are, it's going to be a lot of work and it's very frustrating. But if you take the time first to, as my dad would say, spend 90% of the time sharpening your axe and 10% chopping down your tree, it makes your life a lot easier. It may seem tedious at first, but when you're chopping that tree, you're very happy you have a sharp axe.
So here's something that was an example that I have a friend of mine, Sherry Hamrick, who did a film called Sergeant
Oh
Stubby.
yeah, I know
It,
Sherry.
yeah, it's an animated film. It's brilliant, by the way. My dog loves that film.
My son loves that movie.
So it's an animated film about a real live dog in World War One who saved a bunch of people's lives. The animated film is, and she re-edited it a bunch of times to find a different audience vector. And then she went out, she went to Vetflix, she went to all these places, and they weren't building an audience. When she finally found an audience, it was like going through the people at Petco. It was
Hmm.
going to people who loved pets. And that was the thing that I don't think she got at first. And she's super smart. She figured it out real quick. But I don't think when they first took it out, they were going to like, oh, veterans will love this because it's a World War One film. You know, same thing that Ash had to educate Sony on with Hacksaw Ridge. But I think you're right. You've got to. So here's the question: is it took her a moment, as smart as she is, to figure out go to Petco for sponsorship, go to these, sites that are have animal lovers, go to the SPCA, whatever,
ASPCA.
ASPCA now, animals, yes. And and she weirdly like even went to like different groups you wouldn't think, but they loved animals and pets. And so that was how she found her big audience for that. And I think that this is going back to what you're talking about. It's, you got to find your audience, not only identifying who they are, but access them directly. And how do you access them directly? I think that is the key pinnacle to social media and digital marketing.
It definitely is, and I think Sherry's example with Sergeant Stubby is a great example of you don't always get it on the first try, and I think that's the other thing. As filmmakers, we're trained to early on keep making it, and as you do, you're perfecting your craft. Well, now with how the landscape has changed, and you're adding now audience building and marketing to your skill set, right? You're not going to get it on the first try, so you have to be willing to say, "Oh, well, maybe that's not the audience I thought it was." Or if you're okay with that audience, it's not as big as I wanted, but this is who they are. You might have to then revise the size and scope of your project to support the audience that you're trying to get.
Yeah.
And both of those are okay, but probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned and working with people over the last 20 years is you have to have a level of flexibility, knowing when it's time to pivot. Is it did I get this right audience? No. Well, do I want to keep looking for them? Or do I want to take this one, which means I have to change this other thing? Something's always going to have to change. The plan is going to be the plan, but it's never going to be the exact way that you wanted it to be.
Can I insert one thing about influencers real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so this is something I sort of, through you and Ash, I've been educated over the years and I'm learning this personally. One thing that Ash always brings up is what he does is he creates a core audience of super fans. And these are people that have influence within the social media realm, but that will not shut the hell up about your project because they feel like they're a part of it. So you engage an audience to a point where they feel personally involved. As a filmmaker, you go, hey, I want you personally, Damion, to be part of my film. They feel engaged enough that they become what you guys refer to as super fans.
Yep.
A great example of that is, and by the way, I'm a comic nerd from way back. I've been collecting comics since I was 11 years old. And one of the things that happened in 2012, well, probably 2011, was Marvel announced that they were going to make a new Marvel movie. Now, we had seen the Fantastic Four flop on its face numerous times. We'd seen other efforts over the years. And they said, we're going to take a third tier tertiary character in the Marvel universe. And we're going to take this drunken bum actor who can't even get a completion bond on him. And we're going to put it all together and we're going to make this movie called Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. When the fans found it, and everybody's like, Iron Giant? What? What is this thing? Who's this Iron person? When the fans found out, they knew Iron Man and they loved Robert Downey Jr. And when the Marvel fans found out that they were making Iron Man, they would not shut the hell up. Scott Rosenberg and I were at a Comic-Con that year, and all people were talking about everywhere was they're making an Iron Man movie. And the fans went crazy. And that is why I think single-handedly, and even Jon Favreau, who directed it, and we've worked with John, he did Cowboys and Aliens. Even John said he couldn't believe the amount of fan base that was built off of that and how many people, like, he was like, my fan base got built off of that because I was making that movie. But I think it's one of those things that it's worth addressing. Creating fans is one thing, but creating super fans and finding people who have influence and who will get behind your project and push it forward, I think that's incredibly important as well.
You bring up a really good point that I wanted to touch on. And then I'm going to turn this back on you and ask you a question. So those super fans are, whenever I do audience work, that's who we're targeting first. Who are going to be the people who are there before you have anything, before you've cast, before who are there, who are like, I'll give you my email info because this sounds so interesting to me before you actually have anything to show for it. Um, because once you have them, they start to bring other people along. And again, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but having an audience when you're going to get funding or distribution doesn't necessarily mean you have a million people. If you have 5,000 people and 400, like 4,999 of them are talking about you all the time, that's more compelling than having a million people and 200 people talking about you, right? And so what a lot of people mistake is the size of the audience for the activity of the audience, because that small, incredibly engaged audience is more likely to show up than that really big, unengaged audience. And so, what we really want to start with at the beginning is the quality of the fans. Who are these people? Are they willing to show up? Are they willing to put their name on the line? Like, give me a call, let me know. Am I willing to pay for something even before you have anything to show me? Because those are the people who are more than likely to show up and really help get your project to be successful. Now, having said that, one of the things that's really important is understanding how banks and distributors all look at that sort of those various elements, the size of the audience, the quality of the audience. And it really depends on genre, it depends on theme, all sorts of things, and market and where it's going and where it's going to be distributed. But would you be able to speak a little bit about how you've brought that? So when people come in and they bring their audience, how do you help them understand and present it and package it to now banks, distributors, et cetera? Because all of these things have to go and tell a cohesive story to those people who are going to help get them beyond development into production.
Sure. And I think, one of the key to that, the banks actually don't care about anything. They don't care who's in the movie. They don't care about
Yeah,
anything.
that's true.
They want to know that your distributor is going to back this play with that, remember that collateral instrument that we talked about earlier. So you're basically now talking about dealing with a distributor, these incredibly lazy and unimaginative that we discussed. So what you have to do is let them know that they can monetize that audience. And you need to show them how they're going to monetize that audience as a filmmaker. And you go into saying things like, oh, well, I've got 50,000 or 100,000 or 500,000 people. You go to them and you tell them this is why we need analytics data from like Ribo and from you, is because when I'm going to a distributor representing either our film or representing a client's film, I'm going into that distributor going, okay, look, here's the audience. It's only 5,000 people. That's fine. Here's how you're going to monetize them, because here is their buying power. And we have all this data from them. Here's their buying power. Here's their influence. Here's what they're going to see it. And here's the platform they're going to want to see it on, which coincides with your distribution model. And I think once you educate the distributor on the fact that, okay, I don't have to work very hard and I can monetize this audience, that's how you're going to turn the key to get this moving, to get your financing, to get your film made, which all becomes this domino path. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes total sense. When you've been working with folks, say someone they got through the distribution or the development phase, and now they're like, okay, we're getting into production. Um, what mistake do you see people make as soon as they get into that production phase? Like, I got it, I'm going, and then
Yeah, I think, and here's the funny thing. I've talked to you and Ash separately about this in the past. I try to tell clients, look, you're going to pay Damion X number of dollars to give you a calendar to show you how to start building an audience, but that's not where it ends. When you get into pre-production, production, that's when his work really begins. Because while you're going off making your film, you better have somebody doing vlogs or daily, what's happening on set. Get your actors behind this. Get a bunch of B-roll. Get what we used to refer to as an electronic press kit or an EPK. You want to get these things moving so that you're building that excitement. So you're getting these super fans even more involved. One of the things that I've seen has been very successful in independent films is they get an audience, they stay in touch with that audience on their website. They hold things like, hey, if you register now, you may get a walk-on role on the set. You may get this. We'll give you these posters. We'll get you this stuff. So it's this incentivized thing, much like crowdfunding. If you look at Kickstarter is not, hey, I love you and I'm going to give you money. Kickstarter is, what kind of crap are you going to give me? What kind of swag am I going to get if I give you $5? All right, now what kind of swag am I going to get if I give you $10? So that's an engagement level. And when you translate that to film, into marketing, into social media, into building an audience, how are you going to engage that audience and make them super fans? You can't just go, oh, thanks a lot. Now I'm in production. I got what I needed because I got a distribution deal because I had enough of you people. That you got to keep engaging them further and further and get more and more involved with them and get them more involved with you through that process. Get them more excited. Hey, we're going to Comic-Con. Come see us. We'll be at this booth. Like, it's an ongoing process that most filmmakers, I would say 90% of the filmmakers I talk to, they're like, okay, so I did my social media. Now what? Well, it just started. And believe me, it gets nothing but bigger and bigger. Well, I have to pay all this money for that. That's in your budget. Don't worry about it. Just do it. And then you go off and make your film. But again, it goes back to that, it takes a village. You bring on a team and let them do their job while you're focusing on yours. But it's important that you remember you got to bring on that team first. Part of that team is somebody who can keep engaged with your audience and keep building that buzz and that word of mouth so that people actually want to see it when it finally comes out.
It's like, I think the way that my mentor described it to me is you're building a relationship with your audience. It's not purely transactional. You're not going like, here's my $5, disappear, right? Because nobody wants that. You have to prove to me, one, that you made something that I'm going to want to see. You also have to show me that you want me to see the thing you want me to see. Um, and remind me that of all the things that are popping up between now and when you make your thing, that I still want to see your thing. And so many times we think that marketing is, I put it out there and you saw a poster, now you're just going to show up and do the thing, but that's not it. It's a lot of building trust. And it seems weird to say, but it really is. If you think about how many times you've seen a movie or an ad for something and you go, I bet all the good pieces were in that trailer, huh? I don't trust that you're going to be able to give me something that's going to really be able to hold my attention, right? But if you show me, and I've been pulled into movies like this where it's beforehand and I don't know how I get sucked into it, and I'll see, behind the scenes, someone announced the talent who was joining, and I think, oh, I like that person. They really do really interesting stuff. This is a departure from what they really do. Let me just check this out. Huh, okay. And then I see something else and it's complete, oh, wait, this really is interesting. And every time you're giving me a little breadcrumb, it's not always about the story. And I work with a lot of tech folks too, and they think the way to get you to buy something is if I tell you all the specs. It gets this many gigs of RAM and it does this and it goes this fast. But that's not the thing. It's more, what's the value in it? How do I communicate the value? What makes it special? What makes my life easier from this thing? When it comes to media, it's the same thing. What what place is this going to have in my life, in my consumption behaviors? Is it going to make me laugh? Is it a way for me to spend time with my family? Is it a way for me to escape and just watch something and be free? Is it just something that is interesting and I'll learn from it? What is that intrinsic value that your project is providing? And I hate to say this because a lot of people take it as, but my art, right? And I have to admit, I was that way too, especially when I was a photographer. I used to like, but my art, right? And then I got over that really quick when I realized that my art was commerce. It was a product. And I was going to sell that product, I had to market it. And I mistakenly thought that being in magazines was going to be the thing, but magazines were that was actually advertisement to get me a deal with a brand or something else. And film works similarly, where sometimes the advertisement isn't necessarily going to be your project. Depending on the type of creative you are, it might be you and your sensibility and how those things are reflected in your stories. Or it could be the themes that you talk about, whether they're different themes, they all tie together to sustainability. I'm only saying that because we were just at an AI conference and people were talking about sustainability. But those could all be different ways for connecting with your audience. But sometimes it could be, and this is where I think we can get into the conversation of AI. Using AI as a tool, it's not going to be the end all be all, right? It's not going to create something brilliant for you and make you famous. It could, but it'll be a flash in the pan. It's not sustainable, right? However, if you have a really great idea and you're having a hard time articulating it to people, say you were able to get development funding, But going beyond that has been really hard. If distributors aren't understanding your vision, you can leverage AI to help you make that thing. So say you don't have the budget, it's going to be a sci-fi film and you need big special effects. You don't necessarily have the budget to do that. Make one scene scaled back, whichever one is the most controlled but really compelling, and use AI to help you fill in the gaps. That's one way of doing it. So you can start to do the thing. And I think tracking that journey, I don't mean being an influencer where you're like, and now I'm eating, and not that kind of tracking your journey, but as you're doing it, telling those super fans about the challenge that you had. Hey, I'm trying to build this thing and it's expensive and I'm not really sure how to do it. I'm gonna try using this AI tool. We're gonna all film it and we'll have that fill in the background or whatever it is. Now your super fans are like, oh wow, what can I do to help? I'm gonna share this, right? Because you brought them in and kind of pulled back the curtain and said, look, here's how the sausage gets made. I need a little help. And believe me, people want to help because now if when it becomes really big, guess what they're going to do? I was there when it was really, I was one of those first people. People love that. I can't stress how much people love being I'm the person that people went to discover this new thing. And so I think one of the ways that people look at AI right now is only in terms of threat, but there are ethical ways to use it and ways to help you where like if you weren't going to hire anyone anyway, then AI isn't taking anyone's job, right? If you're concerned about the copyright, there are private local AI models that you can use on your computer that don't ever touch the internet. My company, we're building one, right? Like, you can do this all on your laptop and no one else ever gets to see it, but you've been able to do the thing, right? And so
What?
it's
Let's
leveraging the tools you have to be resourceful because again, as the industry changes, you can't rely on distributors or producers to do all that work for you now.
Before we move into that realm of AI and tools, let me sort of backtrack because we've had a couple of questions come up, and we'll answer all these questions, by the way, to everybody here. We'll answer all these questions that you put in the Q&A, but I want to address one thing that before we move forward, kind of go back to the beginning of this conversation is somebody asked, how do you get an audience when you don't have followers on any platform, when you don't have a budget? Let me answer half of that, and you can answer the other half if I may. So the second half of that, which I'll answer first, is if you don't have a budget. This is where development funding comes in. So when you start, there's two types. If you remember the beginning of our conversation, I said there's two types of funding. There's development financing and there's production financing. Development financing, we have finance facilitators that we can direct clients to. Just get in touch with us. We're happy to do that. We don't charge anything for it. But there are people that you can go to or finance facilitators that will get you the money for development. Now, once you've had that budget, in that we'll do a development budget for you so you know all the items that you need to address to get a fully packaged developed deal. But part of that is you don't have a budget, you go to a finance facilitator through us, we'll help you get that. They will get you the money so that you can get into development. And then that's the second part of this question, which is how do you have an audience when you don't have any followers or a platform? I'm going to leave that to you, Damion.
The simple answer is the same way everyone else does. You got to do the work, right? It's not easy, but it doesn't mean that there aren't ways that you can't speed it up a little bit. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, I don't want to buy followers. You're not buying followers. What you're doing is promoting yourself. You're promoting your project. Have you ever seen a car that wasn't marketed in some sense, that didn't have a commercial or an ad or something? No, products market. And what you're doing is marketing a product. And that's why earlier I called projects or films products. Not in the sense that they're cheap and disposable or commoditized, but in the sense that they need the same sort of attention that anyone else gives to something that they want an audience to pay for. And so if you don't have any budget and you're still trying to do that from zero, it's time, right? That's always the trade-off, right? And you don't have the money, but you have the time. If you don't have the time and you don't have the money, hopefully you can find someone to do it. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place and you're not going to be able to get in front of people. But one of the things that's really helpful is consistency over time. And so you start with sometimes, what's my plan? I have enough time to do, if it's going to be social media, one social media post a week. That's what I will do. But since some of my clients don't have time for that. Their audience may not want social media or they don't like social media. They have a newsletter though that they can do. And so they'll start their newsletter and they'll write one article a week or one update a month, whatever that is. And then as they're meeting people in the industry, hey, yeah, no, check out my newsletter. I'm doing this thing. So now it's a personal one-on-one conversation. Or if you have a friend who has a big following, hey, would you mind plugging my newsletter? And you start to find that there are even other groups that, so people are more than willing to do swaps. Hey, you know what? I have a newsletter, you have a newsletter. Can we promote each other? Oh, can I be on your podcast and talk about my thing? Those are all free, but they do require time. And so for those times when you don't have the money, you can mitigate that with the time you have. It might take longer, it's more work, but it's also free, right? You don't have to actually pay money for it.
Well, and let's take on that note, people come to me as clients and like, well, I don't have that money. And you go, okay, well, here's the opportunity to get that money. Here's a finance facilitator. Here's Film Funding LA. Here's these other groups that can raise you that money. So wait, I'm responsible for it? Yeah, it's your film. So I think that, going back to the very sub-zero is if you're making a movie, are you willing to be responsible for that film all the way through? And if you're not, then there's nothing you or I can ever do to help those people. But if you're willing to step up and take responsibility, that's financial responsibility, that's the responsibility for building an audience. You still remember, build a team. It takes a village, and we can help you build that team through people like Damion, through people like Film Profit, the analytics firm, through Factor Media Group, who does budgets and schedules. We have those resources, but you have to be able to commit yourself to being responsible for your film. And I think that's the bottom line to filmmaking.
And the good thing is you don't have to start from scratch. Social media has been around long enough to where, I mean, you can watch TikTok videos or YouTube tutorials about how to do this thing, right? Or you can even Google sometimes or use Chat GPT, whatever it is that you use to get information to help you build that. And to be very honest, the most skilled people in this industry who do what I do, who are influencers, all of them learned how to do this by just doing it and then watching other people. It wasn't like I took a class at UCLA and I came out and I knew everything about social media. Like what you learn in school on that is going to be years behind what's really happening today. And so it's okay to just dig in and do it. The same way that we do with a lot of projects is you don't know everything about filmmaking when you get out of film school. So if you never went to film school, you probably know even less, right? But you learn it by doing it and researching and doing your homework. And so as an independent filmmaker, especially, it's the onus is really on you to make that happen. It's your vision and you have to really commit to making it happen. If your goal is to just write and pass something across a desk, that's a different world. Then you're not an independent filmmaker, you're a worker for hire, or you're an in-house writer, or you're in a writer's room. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but they're very different value propositions. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Again, didn't want to interrupt. We have a few questions that are coming up, and how do you feel, Damion, about maybe we can answer some of those?
We can start going. Yeah, let's start going to questions.
So, do you want to hit that, or you want me to?
Go for it. Do you have one you were looking at to start with?
I did have one right away that I want to address, and then we'll just maybe go down the list as we go. Somebody said, can you talk to us about some self-distributed films that have been successful? There are very, very, very few self-distributed films, and let's define self-distributed. If you're going on right now, if you want to self-distribute, your option is basically AVOD or advertising-based video on demand. That's a platform on, say, Amazon, some of these other streaming services where you can put your movie up and you split revenues with the streaming service, and it's based on your advertising dollars. They will come in for a fee and say, hey, look, here's our advertisers that might fit this. But you're looking at maybe 30 to 40% of your revenue back if you do an AVOD platform. And I've talked to distributors and producers reps ad nauseum, and it's usually 10 to 30% of your revenue comes back from AVOD. So AVOD to me is your last dig. It's like you went to Walmart, you put it on Blu-ray and DVD, it was at Target, on their shelf somewhere where nobody ever saw it. And then you went, okay, I'm still a little shy, but I can go to AVOD now, or advanced, Audi, advertising based video on demand. I can go to AVOD and I can get that extra 30% of my budget back so I can pay my investors and they won't like put me in the poorhouse or take my house from me. Um, AVOD is self-distribution to some extent. If you want to talk about self-distribution historically, look at Roger Corman with Concord Films. Look at Lloyd Kaufman with Troma Pictures. They self-distributed because they created their own distribution platform. It is so difficult, and so it's like Kickstarter campaigns. People go, "Oh, I'm going to do Kickstarter." Somebody, by the way, addressed a Kickstarter question, which I'll answer in a moment. But Kickstarter campaigns. Oh, I'll just go out there and millions of people will come. No, they won't. Kickstarter is like working at McDonald's, and it pays just about the same. It's so much labor for so little reward because you have to build the audience. Kickstarter is not going to magically give you a million people.
Yep.
And also Kickstarter is based on, and I've done 2 successful Kickstarter campaigns, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, so why aren't you doing them every day?" Because I don't want to work at McDonald's. It's hard. It's laborious. It's brutal. And it's reward based. People are going to give you money based on what kind of crap you're going to give them back. Not because they love you and your project. Some people, but not very many. So it's going to be basically now you build a platform of, hey, for $5, I'll give you a heartfelt thank you and this button. For $10, I'll give you those 2 things, and plus I'll give you this crap. And for $50, I'll give you even more garbage. So at some point now it all comes together and you raise your money and you go, oh God, I got to deliver all this garbage to all these people that I promised it to. So it is a full-time job. And I think self-distribution is a full-time job. I know how to self-distribute. I wouldn't do it personally. It's too much work. And I can't emphasize that enough that if you think you can spend 80 hours a week doing this, then go for it. But it is a full-time job that's reward is minimal. That's why there's distributors out there. That's why there's producers, reps, and sales agents, because they have the connections to put it through the pipeline so that you don't have to.
I would say from my perspective, if you wanted to self-distribute, hang out with a YouTube influencer for a day and see the work that they have to put in, because it equates to that, the amount of effort you have to put in to build the audience, keep them there, and want them to come to see your thing. And if whatever you're building isn't serialized or repeatable, you're going to have to start from square one every day, essentially, right? Someone will watch it, but now you got to go and find more people who want to watch it. So to mirror your point, it's a lot of work. It's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's not as simple as it seems on the outset.
It's more work than it's worth. Let me we'll go down the line here from questions. And by the way, if you have more questions, please put them in the Q&A box or raise your hand and we'll address that. First one was, how do you get a team to make your movie when you don't have money or budget? We sort of answered that earlier when we said, look, there's options to go raise development financing through finance facilitators or friends and family or getting a group. One thing film school gave me in a year, and then I quit it because it was useless. One thing it gave me was how to build a network. There's other people just like you. Unfortunately, everybody wants to direct, or everybody wants to write, or everybody wants to produce, and that's your network of, I got 9 writers and 7 directors and no producers. But you need to go out and build a network. You need to find people, and you need to go, look, I need a money person. I need somebody who has access to cash. Well, you can come to companies like ours who are development service companies. We're not the only game in town. But you can come to us and we can go, hey, here's Film Funding LA. Give Michael Praver a call. He's going to go get you your money. Or you can go to Fund and Grow. Or there's tons of places out there that, in fact, Connor Murphy, who I think is on this webinar tonight, if you want to reach out to Connor, he works with Fund and Grow. They can get you money for development. There is a lot of resources out there. So, the question is, how do I get, my team on board if I don't have any money? Well, go get the money through finance resources. Use people like our company to get you those resources, and then start building a team based on our resources. Like, how long have you and I known each other? I recommend everybody that they go to you because you can get the job done and they can't do it themselves without you. So that was the first question. Somebody said, if you have big name talent interested, should you delay attaching them until the analytics report is complete, or do you have conditional attachment? I'm sure you have your version of this. Let me give you my. I have had way too many clients have come to me with talent attached. I went to a distributor and the distributor went, absolutely not. So I think you get your ducks in a row with analytics, get a distributor on board and get the distributor to tell you, hey, here's our list of people we would approve. That's my side. Wait, Damion, your thoughts?
I would have to say it depends. Are they going to really add to your project? Because it could be a big name, but they might not be the right big name for you. And I've seen this a lot of times where people assume that the big name is going to be the draw. And I'll give you an example of where it wasn't. I did a project. We were working with someone who was a Disney star. And I think at the time had like 9 million followers on Instagram and this whole big thing. And we're going to get everybody to show up. And like, we'll even do posts on Instagram. And it'll be awesome. The post on Instagram got maybe 100 likes. That's not even like a movie or anything coming out. That's just on Instagram where this person had millions of followers, right? And at the end of the day, that person wasn't adding value to the project. They were a big name, but their name meant nothing in the context of what was being made. And so, from my perspective, is are they relevant for the audience? Because if you're bringing in a big name who the audience either has no connection to or they actually may actively not like, it can hurt you more than it can help you. It's better for you to then just bring in somebody who no one knows, has no baggage associated with them, and they're a blank canvas and can help you tell your story.
Okay, yeah. Somebody asked, do we receive a copy of this afterwards? Grace, do you want to address that? I know you've done it to several people directly.
Yeah, I'm recording right now, and over the next day or two, I'll get an email out to everyone with the recording and contact information and whatnot.
Okay. Next, this is for you, Damien. How do I invite my audience into a film meet, even in development?
Actually, I think there was another half to that one. How
Oh,
do we gather an audience, especially when you're creating a musical documentary? Um, that's like a hug from an angel for me. Like that is probably one of the most, depending on the type of music, it's a really straightforward way to build an audience because you know the type of music, you know the type of people who like that type of music. If it's about a specific band, you know who their fans are. So you start talking about it. That's it. And if you're making posts on social media or doing a blog or a newsletter, if you don't have the audience, pay to promote it. You can pay $5 a week on Facebook if you do that, and we'll start to see it build traction. You don't have to pay a lot of money for it. So that's a misconception that you have to pay thousands of dollars. If you're hitting the right audience, you just need a little bump to get in front of the right person. As soon as that one person who's a super fan sees it, they start to share it and it grows and it grows. So yeah, the musical documentary is great because you kind of have an audience that you can tap into. And there may be other tangential or overlapping audiences that you can get, but that's one of the best. And I'm telling you, music, anime, horror, those are super straightforward and really fun to do because you know where to go and where to find those folks.
I would say that if you're doing a musical documentary, do not invite Timothy Chalamet to be your host.
Yes,
Just saying.
definitely not.
Um, so let's see. Do you want to address some of these as well,
How
Damien?
can I invite my audience into my film, even in development? That's a great question. And so when I work with folks for development, we're doing three. I usually break it into three phases. The development phase is the phase of building an audience. And like I said earlier, it's a relationship. And how do you start a relationship? You introduce yourself, right? And so we take that development phase and make it the introduction. It may not be, hi, I'm so and so, but it could be that too. Usually, what you're doing though is inviting people into the world of whatever it is you're building, and starting to tell people why it matters. So you're doing a faith-based action movie. Where do you find those people? What makes this special, right? Well, you start posting about maybe things that are relevant. You'll put your favorite scripture up, or you'll do your favorite comic book and start to talk about how those things connect. And it's not something that gels immediately. You don't do like your first post, you don't even do your first five and suddenly have a big audience. You use that, honestly, probably your first 30 posts to tell a story about who you are. Who am I? What am I doing? And then as people come and see your later stuff, they'll go back and, oh, yeah, I see who you are. But you have to build a foundation and it's slow over time.
Getting those people engaged is something that I think is really interesting as well. We had a client who had this really strange science fiction, faith-based, religious gods and demons, angels movie, and he went out and started doing social media, and he started a podcast, and he said, "Are angels real?" Man, the engagement he
Mhm.
got from that was surprisingly phenomenal. And then he did another segment on Are Demons Real? And like he was engaging people, he couldn't shut
Yep.
them up because everybody's got an opinion about something. And I think one of the ways to engage people is to engage their opinion about a subject. And I was really,
100%.
yeah, I mean, I was really surprised at the response he got from that. And when he pitched it to it, I'm a little ashamed to say when he pitched it to us, he's like, "Hey, how about if I do a podcast with?" And I asked people if they think angels are real, and I went, like you could hear the crickets in the background behind me. And I was like, sure, sure, go with that. Good luck. And it was like, and I realized right then that engaging your audience and getting their opinion, everybody's got an opinion. That's why social media exists today, because everybody has an opinion and they're willing to tell the world about it. But I think that's, to your point, I think that not only getting that audience and finding who they are and getting that, faith-based audience, but getting them engaged by getting their opinion and getting them involved, I think is really helpful.
It's huge, and it's also, to your point, it's trial and error. You have to try something and see hey, you know what? My audience really likes talking about holy warfare. Let's see, are angels real? If there's a war between angels and demons, who would win? So you start to find those things and talk about them. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. And when it doesn't stick, maybe you try one more time, two more times. Nope. Move on to something else. It's okay to change. And a lot of people are afraid that if I said that and it didn't work, I'm going to look cringy or people aren't going to like it. You can delete. Um,
That's
and
right.
not everyone is going to see all of your posts. And when you find something that works, it's okay. This is probably the biggest lesson I've learned. When you find a format, a theme, a topic that works, you can repeat it. Because as you know, these algorithms don't show your stuff to everybody. So
Mhm.
everyone's not going to see every one of your posts. When you go on a podcast, you can say that exact same thing. And what you'll find out is when you don't, people came to hear you say the thing and you didn't say the thing, and now they're disappointed because you didn't say the thing they wanted to hear. It's a really interesting, we're usually fearful of being too repetitive, but people like that consistency. And I'm talking about the thing, and this is what I'm doing. And so don't be afraid to do that. You're the biggest fan of your project. You're going to also be the biggest salesperson. And if you're uncomfortable with it, it's finding a partner who's willing to do that for you then. Because if you don't want to be the face, someone has to. And finding who that is going to be really important.
And that's part of building your team or your network.
Yep.
So we sort of covered this. Is Kickstarter still better than GoFundMe for crowdfunding? Kickstarter, GoFundMe, they are just laborious pains in the ass that take 3 months of and a horrible waste of your time, effort, money. I would go to somebody like Fund and Grow or Film Funding LA, and they can close it in 3 to 4 weeks. So in terms of budgeting, where's the place for P&A budget in production or independently? So your P&A budget is not part of your production budget, nor is it part of your development budget. It is a separate budget, and that is if you're going theatrical. If you're just doing a streaming service within your production budget, you will have money for bringing on people like Damion to help build your audience as you go. But P&A or print and advertising, as it was traditionally, and it's not even nobody's printing anything; it's all digital now. But that P&A is really digital marketing, and the digital marketing is in the production budget if it's going streaming, which you knew because you found out in development, or it's P&A budget for theatrical, which you're going to wait until you get your production done, and then you're going to bring on P&A firms. There's actually fund people that will fund that. So I hope that answers that question. Damion, you want to take the next one?
What do you think about making a short film as a proof of concept? So I'll read this slowly. And I love this question. What do you think about making a short film as a proof of concept in order to get funding and interest in your movie to make a feature-length film? I think that's a brilliant idea. I think it's really helpful. It helps people see your vision and see that you can execute that vision in the way that you say you can. With a caveat, I would not put myself in the poorhouse doing that. There are so many other ways where you can tell that story. You could use still images. take photographs of people in those scenes and do voiceover on it. You could do a podcast. There are so many ways to communicate and tell that story. And as long as you're telling it in a way that's engaging, it really helps. One of the things that I love doing for my projects is an audio pitch. So I'll have my pitch deck and then I'll record a friend or a voiceover actor or someone telling the story, maybe like 3 to 5 minutes of what's happening in a way that it's more than a trailer, but not a full story. And I'll put music behind it and sound design. May cost me a couple $100 at most. And if I give that to someone, listen to this in your car, right? It's 5 minutes. It'll be really easy. Or you can listen to it at lunch, whatever. Now they don't have to read anything. They just hear this thing and it really forces them to see and imagine and hear and experience it. And then if I need to take it a step further, sometimes I'll create still images. I was a photographer, so I would take images of people in scenes or doing the thing, or if it's animation, have a friend who's a designer can you just sketch them out, whether they're black and white or whatever, and we'll just kind of animate back and forth in slow motion transitions, or it doesn't have to be full on the production to tell the story. You just need to do enough to get somebody to pay attention. It's like reading a picture book. You don't need those pictures to move to be able to enjoy it. When you take the pictures out of the book and you're just reading a novel, you don't need to have pictures to understand what's going on there. So I take that, like if you can do the short film, yes, definitely do it. If it's not going to put you into substantial debt and kind of ruin your credit. If you can think of a more creative way to do it that's less expensive, but still can tell the story well, I would do that first.
Yeah. Yeah, and the one thing about this, and Damion, you sort of just glossed over it, but think about the money it's going to cost you to do that. And is that money worth the investment? And then the other thing is, do you have enough resources, money, whatever it is, resources to make that trailer, that short film look exactly like you envision it? And if you don't, then I would say don't do it, because distributors will look at that and go, yeah, does anybody want this? So, be really careful when it comes to making sizzle reels or trailers. And I think what Damion said is important, because you can do that with relatively no finance or resource and still make it look brilliant and still be enough that it entices people or interests them.
And I'll give you a brief example before we move on to the next question. There was a filmmaker I worked with. He's an independent filmmaker and he loves superhero movies. He wanted to make Spider-Man superhero movie, but clearly did not have a budget for it at all. And he wasn't even going to pretend. But what he did was a really brilliant way of showing Spider-Man without having to show him climbing on walls or and he shot it really well. So you might get like a shadow that looks like it was crawling somewhere, but it was really him hanging from something, by his house. Or you would see like his shoe fall. He's like, uh-oh, is Uncle Ben going to see me like sneaking into the house? So he found all these creative workarounds. So it looked really beautiful. It was 2 minutes, really short, and it was shot amazingly, but he didn't actually have to do the effects pieces. He just did enough to tell the story and to let people know that he could tell a story that was Spider-Man, right? Even though he wasn't going to do a Spider-Man, he just wanted to be able to do some sort of a superhero film. And when working with him, I really learned that the superpower that filmmakers have is creativity. Unleash it. Don't be afraid to do the thing that's not what everyone says. You don't necessarily have to do the short and take it to festivals. It might be that you do an episodic podcast where you're testing out the themes. I did that for one of mine. We started off as an episodic podcast and people started to like it, right? And so there's so many different ways that you can bring it to life. You can do a table read and have people talk about it and make a documentary about yourself, right? Making a movie. And there's so many things that you can do. So yes, I think that's a brilliant idea. I love the idea of a proof of concept, but it doesn't always have to be a short film.
Right. So I'm skipping down, but I'll go back to the list of questions but somebody asked earlier about grants. And I have had many filmmakers try to get grants for film, for development, for it. It's like Kickstarter. It's really hard, and it's a lot of labor and a lot of your time. And the grants don't normally come through full financing, come through in stages. So then you have to figure out how to cover the interim costs while you're getting to the next stage so you can get your next drawdown of grant funding. It's a lot. For filmmaking, I do not necessarily recommend it. Moving back to our questions, though.
Oh,
Uh,
by the way, the reggae documentary, awesome. You
yeah,
have a huge audience.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was being facetious when I mentioned Timothy Chalamet because he just made a recent comment about how he hates musicals and
The
opera.
opera, yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I think a reggae is awesome. I love reggae personally. So,
And
um,
even if it's opera, it might be niche, but people who love opera love opera. I'm one of those people. So I'd watch it.
there you go. Um, do you prefer to feel engaged yourself to dive into a client's project? This is a question for MPMG, I think, but I'd like to hear your side of it as well, Damion, from a social media standpoint. For me, at Moving Pictures Media Group, I don't have to feel engaged or love a film. There are a couple that we are working with right now that I do love their projects. It just has to be marketable because I don't want a filmmaker wasting their time if there's no way to get this out to market. So when I unfortunately have turned away a lot of clients because they're not ready yet to start spending time, money, and effort. They need to go back and get coverage and have somebody, a third party, come in and go, hey, here's some problems with your script. Maybe you want to fix that first. So I don't need to be personally engaged, but I do need it to be marketable so I don't waste everybody's time because I'm bringing in vendors like Damion and other vendors, and I don't want to waste their time, your time, my time if it's not something that's marketable. So I don't need to be personally engaged, but I would prefer that it at least has some market value.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would prefer to be engaged. That's always fun because it means I'm doing something I really enjoy. But if I'm not the audience for it, I don't need to be engaged. I need to understand the audience and what's driving them, right? And so being engaged means it's like candy for me. It's icing on the cake, but I don't need to be. And if I'm not the one personally supporting that, which sometimes I'm not, it's someone on my team who has a much closer relationship and understands that audience and can speak to it better than I can. Especially for things that require very niche understanding beyond my capability in a short time frame, then my engagement is let's make sure this is successful and I can track metrics, but I'll pull in somebody who really knows that. So it's a preference, yes, but what's more important to me is actually the knowledge and being able to understand the drivers for the audience than whether or not I like the project.
Okay. Um, Here's one that's I like this question here. Do you do the analytics report first and the budget first? I have a very complex top sheet, but see the report as first step, then line producer will approach. Okay, development is a series of things that you need to do in tandem. When I'm engaging with a client, we'll put together a development budget. We'll do it in a series of drawdowns. But the first things we do is create analytics and have the analytics company work directly with whoever our UPM or line producer or AD is that's doing the budget and schedule. They coordinate with each other. So what happens is we bring on a team. And by the way, Damion, you've been part of these. When I engage a client, I invite all of my vendors onto a Zoom call without the client present because we all know each other way too well and we're not as professional as we should be. But we do get the job done. But I have all my vendors come onto a call and we talk about it. I have the analytics people talk to Damion. Damion talks to the producers rep and about distribution. And we have a fully engaged conversation with all the vendors at once so that we know how we're going to approach this and everybody's communicating with everybody else. So it's not an analytics report, then we do a budget, it's everybody working together in tandem to make sure that everything works out
And
correct.
it's really because all of our roles depend on each other, just like any set. You have lots of people working because those roles all depend on each other to make the final project, right? And we do the same. So if I'm looking at the audience and I'm like, oh, this audience is smaller than we thought, and Jeff tells me it's going to be this many people, and I go, yeah, and to get to them though, it's going to cost a lot more money because they're really hard to reach. And then we're like, ooh, this budget might not get us there, and we know then we might have to jigger some things and move things around, or hey, we have a really huge audience and we should be able to get them really easily. Perfect, let's do that. But it's really because those things have to work together in order for it to work. If they all happen in a vacuum, you have a likelihood of making a catastrophic mistake that can harm the project.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip one question and come back to it because it's a question for you, but I want to answer this one first. What's the best way to manage your budget on any film, whether it be a short film or a blockbuster feature? Get a really good line producer and a really good accountant, period. There is no short answer to that. And there's no shortcut that you can take to that. You need to make sure that you have a reputable line producer and a reputable accountant third-party accountant who's going to oversee and make sure you come on time and on budget. If it's over $1 million, you're going to want a completion bond on that, and they're going to come in with their 2 cents as well. That is an insurance bond that ensures the film will be completed. No shortcut to there. So let's move back up to the question for you, Damion, which is Hugh asked about what do you think about using AI to create a trailer about your project? My brand integration team mentioned this as powerful for brand integration.
Mixed feelings. I was telling Ray earlier, I just sat on a panel with like the head legal counsel for SAG-AFTRA and like a bunch of lawyers talking about using AI and the implications, both ethical and just in general, business wise. And one of the things is it depends, because is that going to be representative of what your final work is first, right? That if it's not and you're just doing a thing, it should at least represent the tone and the look and feel. It might not be exact, but it'll get you there. The second piece is, especially right now, it depends on where you're using AI. Are you using it for voiceover? Are you using it to do completely synthetic action and movement? Because those are very different things. I do know of a filmmaker who wanted to do a trailer, and so he wanted to do a fight scene and show people that he could do it. He actually filmed himself fighting both sides of the fight, and then composited those two together, made a 3D mesh of it, then fed it to AI and turned it into an animated fight scene. Well, that's something that's interesting, right? Because it would have taken him a really long time to get all of those visuals done. But now he has a trailer that he can use, or at least a scene that he could use to do it. So I think it really depends on how you're using it and what you're doing. If you're using it for brand integration, and it's purely a money play, I think it limits the brands that you can work with, because not every brand is willing to work with AI, not because they necessarily don't want to, but because a lot of them are afraid of the backlash that they might get for doing it. Coke can sustain that backlash. Some brands can't, right? And so I think it really just, you have to think very carefully about how does it move your project forward? And where are you using it strategically?
Yeah. So we have another question that's going to be addressed to you. I'm going to skip that and come back to it, if I may, because I think this is going to be an interesting topic. So the next question beyond that, and again, we'll come back to this previous one. As a first-time filmmaker, I've been advised to make a micro-budget feature since many debut films do not recoup. I've also heard that films in the 300 to 800 range, 1,000 range, can be especially challenging because they often lack the marketing support needed to break through. Since an under 100K film be very difficult from the one I want to make, I believe I need to at least, I need at least around 600,000 to do it properly. So I'm a bit torn. When you evaluate potential returns, how much does budget level factor into that? Wow, that is a really in-depth question, which I can take apart into many components, but I'm just going to give you a broad stroke. Microfilm budgets, hard to monetize. Documentaries, hard to monetize. If you can't monetize it, that means there's no money coming back. $300,000 to $800,000 films, super hard to monetize. Regardless of the budget, you're going to want to develop everything properly, because part of development is determining what that budget will be based on what your audience is, based on a lot of other factors that will determine how you're going to take that to the market and actually be profitable. So I would not worry about, should I make a micro budget film for, no, how are you going to get your money back? Should I make a $300,000 to $800,000 film? Maybe. Do you have an audience for it and have direct access to that audience? And can somebody like Damion help you build that audience? These are all things that, you're asking about 8 different questions here, but the short version of all that is, when you go through development, you're going to have analytics that is going to break all this down for you, and they're going to work with your budget and schedule people to figure out what's the budget and how's it going to make money. So there's a floor and a ceiling. The ceiling is your audience. It's your saturation point of how you can build an audience and how you can reach them. That's your ceiling. Your floor is the base level. What's it going to cost to get out alive? What is my day-out-of-day schedule? I'm on this location on this day shooting these scenes with these actors and this crew, and this is my cost burn rate per day. Somewhere between the floor and the ceiling is your budget. And that's going to be determined by a lot of factors. So I can't really answer and break down each one of these questions that you had, but I can tell you that the reason you do development properly is so that you can answer all these questions and they're not guesswork. So I hope that answers the question. And I'm going to just quickly turn that over to Damion with the next question, which was, I made a soundtrack with 8 songs. Each song is coming from the one main character POV. Can I use this as part of packaging when pitching? All yours, Damion.
Cool. And I'll touch on the last one too. Ray said it depends. And just to kind of follow up on that, it really depends on what type of project you're doing. Where's that project going to go? I do know some people who have made micro budgets that do well, but there are very specific type of film for a very specific audience, and they know exactly where it's going to go. It's like a $70,000 lifetime special kind of movie for Tubi, right? They made their money back, but they couldn't do that same movie and get it on Netflix or in a theater and expect to make money on it. So to Ray's point, it depends. Now back to the soundtrack, because I love soundtracks. It's the heart of everything I do on creative work. And each song is coming from, this is a gold mine. Yes, definitely use it in pitching. You can use it in background. You can use it for doing like an audio pitch. It can set the tone. I don't know if, well, no one's probably seen my pitches, but I always have music in it. And so the title slide is usually, especially from the POV of the main character, it really helps ground somebody in the world, especially if that music is going to be in the project. That more than anything else gives it tone. How many times have you seen a film that does really well because the soundtrack, people loved the soundtrack and then they all go to see it, right? That's I think a major selling point. And if you have that already, it's great. You can tease those, you can put it in different places, you can do TikTok dances around it. There's so many things you can do with it. And music is, I will say this because I've experienced it, is both the bane of my existence and the joy of my life, right? Like licensing and rights and all that can be really complicated and sometimes really just make you want to pull your hair out. But by the same time, it motivates an audience, it moves people, and it really does set the tone really well. That's why films have scores, is because music does such heavy lifting. So definitely use it where you can. If there's one song you think is the most compelling, take that one and run with it.
That's actually a really good answer. Let's see here. Next, for those with no experience in filmmaking but wish to develop their craft, would you recommend getting a job on a film set and working your way up, or maintaining a more stable day job and practicing filmmaking on the side? Sorry if this question is not strictly relevant to the topic of the session, but thanks in advance. It is relevant. And look, everybody's going to have an opinion about something, and I don't normally dispense advice, but I would say working on a set, I have never, that's not true. I have one person who worked as a PA on one of the films I produced, and they did go on to write a screenplay and sell it. But I think starting out, you're going to wind up being a PA. If you just want the experience, you want to get there, that's great, but it's not working your way up. You're going to go into an entry level and it's an entry level that doesn't have advancement. You're going to come in as a grip. You're going to come in as something, as a PA or a production assistant. You're going to come in as accountant. There's no lateral movement up. That's where you are. So I would say if you want to be a filmmaker, be a filmmaker. I would say you have resources right now. You have companies like my company that can help you start from zero and get all the resources you need to go make your film. There's a guy, Lloyd Kaufman, who I got my start with over at Troma. I worked with Troma. I did work my way up with him, but he was a rare breed back then that doesn't exist anymore. He was like, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He goes, "Great, you're the AD." And I'm like, "What does AD stand for?" But that was back in, the day. I think now what you're getting is you're finding out that working your way up on a film set doesn't necessarily work. Does it help you develop a network? Maybe. Does it help you move up the ladder? Not really. I think right now with all the resources available through, again, like companies like mine, you can start from zero and get all the resources you need to go make your own film. Lloyd Kaufman has a book out, which I encourage everybody to read. It's called Go Make Your Own Damn Film. And I think that is sage advice. Go make your own damn film. And don't worry about wasting your time. And yeah, don't quit your day job, because you still got to, pay rent, and if you have a dog, feed that thing once in a while. So I hope that helps and answers your question. Damion, anything to add to that?
I mean, from a personal level, I didn't go to film school. I didn't come out as a filmmaker. I wasn't like I was I was a neuroscientist. So for people who didn't know, and then I moved into data and analytics because they were numbers. But I did do photography and I worked for studios, and so I just observed and I learned and did small things. And my best friend was a filmmaker, so he asked me to be in one of his shorts. Sure, I'll do that, and like watched what happened, kind of figured things out while I was still doing my day job, so that when I did get the chance to write a script or to produce something, I wasn't starting from scratch. I didn't know everything, but I had learned enough to know that I didn't know everything. And so I knew to pull in somebody who could help me with that. Hey, you know what? You're a really great line producer. Do you mind handling this budgeting thing? Because like I don't have time for it. And you know it way better than I do. Like, how do I handle fringes? I don't know, right? So don't quit your day job, but learn, do as much as you can, read and then test and practice with like, I'm gonna do a short film that just takes one person or two people and I'll film that. It's just two people talking in dialogue, just so I can figure out how to make that happen and kind of build your way up. You don't necessarily have to go on set, but if you want to go on set, there's a lot of value in that as well. You're going to end up there at some point. So whether you learn it now or later, you'll have to learn that skill to begin.
Perfect. I think that covered most of the questions. One of the things that I did get as a personal message was, how do I reach out to Damion's company? How do I reach out to MPMG? Grace, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I'm gonna email everyone contact information, but I can also drop it in the chat if you just want to hang out for a minute or two while I put it in there. Yeah.
And I would encourage, reach out to Damion if you want to know more about social media. He's very generous with his time. He's extremely knowledgeable. If you want to contact our company and find out more about development, we have a submission portal. Grace can send all that information to how to reach Damion directly and how to reach MPMG. I would encourage you to move forward and, make a film. If that's what you want to do, then again, be responsible for your film, but know that you have the resources available to get your film made and build an audience. And again, the subject of this was building an audience. And I think hopefully we've imparted enough knowledge to get people started with, okay, this is attainable and I can do these things. So again, it all comes down to resources and it takes a village, and we can help you with those vendors. We can help you build that network so that you can actually go out and make your own film.
Well, here, I'll pop in my email really quick so people can get it. There we go.
Okay, yeah, you should have all those in the chat. And then again, this will be recorded and sent to everybody, and we will send everybody's contact information out. So Damion, any parting shots there?
Just know that what you see and what people tell you the industry is not necessarily what there is. There are lots of ways in. There are lots of ways to really have a successful career. You don't have to go theatrical, then streaming, and then whatever it is. You can have a very successful career and never having exhibited theatrically. And finding people like Ray, like Grace, who can actually help you navigate that is really going to be crucial for not making some of the mistakes that can cost you a lot of time and money.
Good point. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Grace will be letting everybody know when our next webinar will be and any other events that are taking place, and look forward to meeting many of you if you're interested in moving forward. Thanks.
Well, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Damion.
Good night.
Good night.